The hospital hallway was silent. Nora stood motionless outside the emergency room, her hands clasped tightly together. Through the small glass window, she could see doctors and nurses moving quickly around Ethan's bed. Mrs. Adebayo and several students arrived minutes later. No one spoke. Everyone prayed in silence. Then, the steady sound of the heart monitor became one long, continuous tone. The doctors stopped. One by one, they lowered their heads. The room grew still. A few moments later, the elderly doctor stepped outside. The first rays of sunlight stretched across the quiet town of Green Valley, painting the rooftops in shades of gold. Birds sang from mango trees lining the streets as students of Evergreen International College gathered excitedly in front of the school gate. Suitcases, backpacks, and sleeping bags were scattered everywhere. Some parents hugged their children tightly, while others gave endless reminders. Don't forget to eat on time. Call me every evening. And please, stay away from trouble. The graduating class laughed as they boarded the two large buses waiting outside the school. This was no ordinary excursion. It was the school's annual 3-day educational camp at Eagle Mountain Eco Reserve, and the research project they completed there would count toward their final examination. Excitement buzzed through the air. No one knew that before the trip was over, every single one of them would carry home a lesson that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Among the crowd was Ethan Okoro, an 18-year-old whose smile seemed capable of chasing away anyone's sadness. He wasn't the richest student. He wasn't the smartest. He wasn't the most athletic. Yet somehow, everyone knew his name. As students struggled with their luggage, Ethan hurried from one person to another. Need help? I've got this. Don't worry, I'll carry it. Within minutes, he had carried 3 heavy bags, helped the teacher organize supplies, and even comforted a frightened junior student who was crying because it was his first school trip. His classmates often joked that Ethan had been born with happiness in his pocket. What makes you smile all the time? His friend Daniel asked. Ethan shrugged with a grin. Smiling is free. Daniel laughed. I don't think anyone can ever make you angry. Ethan simply smiled again. If only Daniel knew how much pain hid behind that smile. Standing several meters away was Nora Daniels. Unlike the others, she stood quietly beneath a flowering tree with a sketchbook pressed against her chest. Her long braided hair rested over one shoulder. Instead of talking to anyone, she carefully sketched the school building as the morning sunlight touched its walls. Some students glanced at her before whispering among themselves. There she is. The quiet girl. I heard she spends weekends drawing trees. Another girl giggled. Maybe she likes trees more than people. Nora pretended not to hear. She had learned long ago that silence hurt less than arguments. Inside the assembly hall, Mrs. Adebayo, the graduating class coordinator, stepped onto the stage. She clapped once. The noisy room gradually became quiet. Good morning, students. Good morning, Ma. I know everyone is excited about this trip. Cheers filled the hall. She smiled. But remember, Eagle Mountain is more than a tourist destination. She pointed toward a large banner displaying beautiful forest, rivers, wildlife, and waterfalls. You will observe nature, study conservation methods, learn local history, and complete a field research project. She paused. The project carries 20% of your final examination score. Immediately, the excitement dropped. Groans echoed around the hall. Mrs. Adebayo laughed. I knew that would get your attention. The students laughed with her. But I hope each of you discover something even more valuable than good grades. She looked around thoughtfully. Sometimes the greatest lessons are not found inside textbooks. As everyone headed toward the buses, a small leather notebook slipped from Nora's backpack. She didn't notice. 3 girls walking behind her quickly picked it up. Oh. A diary. Let's see what secrets she's hiding. One girl opened the first page. Instead of secrets, they found a handwritten list. Things I want to do before I leave school. Watch the sunrise from a mountain. Watch the sunset with someone who truly cares. Plant a tree. Rescue an injured animal. Sleep beneath a sky full of stars. Make one true friend. Tell someone how much they matter. Leave behind a reason for someone to smile. The girls burst into laughter. Seriously? This is your big secret? You actually wrote this? Nora rushed forward and gently took back her notebook. It wasn't meant for anyone else. One girl folded her arms. You're so strange. Without saying another word, Nora climbed onto the bus. From his seat near the window, Ethan had watched everything. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing. He wondered why such simple dreams had been treated like something embarrassing. The buses finally pulled away from the school. Music played through the speakers. Students sang loudly. Some took selfies. Others argued over window seats. Mr. Raymond, one of the teachers, stood at the front of the bus. Please remain seated. Nobody listened. After nearly 2 hours on the highway, dark clouds rolled across the sky. Rain began falling. Within minutes, it became a heavy downpour. The driver slowed the bus. Visibility became poor. Suddenly, boom! A loud explosion shook the bus. Students screamed. The bus swerved before coming to a safe stop beside a quiet forest road. One of the rear tires had burst. Everyone climbed out while the teachers contacted the school for assistance. Some students complained loudly. Others worried they would arrive late. Nora quietly walked toward a nearby tree, opened her sketchbook, and began drawing the rain falling over the forest. Ethan noticed. He walked over slowly. You really like drawing? She nodded without looking up. It helps me hear my thoughts. You can hear thoughts. She smiled faintly. When everything else becomes too noisy. Ethan sat on a nearby rock. I've never thought of it like that. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The rain continued falling. Finally Ethan asked. If you could draw one perfect memory, what would it be? Nora looked toward the gray sky. A day I never wanted to end. He smiled. Maybe this trip will give you one. For the first time that morning. Nora smiled without forcing it. Almost an hour later, another school bus arrived. The students continued their journey. As evening approached, the mountains appeared in the distance. The buses finally entered Eagle Mountain Eco Reserve. Towering trees reached toward the clouds. A crystal-clear river flowed gently beside wooden cabins. Colorful birds flew overhead while butterflies danced among wildflowers. The students stood speechless. It feels like another world, Daniel whispered. Mrs. Adebayo smiled proudly. For the next 3 days. She spread her arms toward the beautiful landscape. This is your classroom. The students erupted into applause. After dinner, everyone gathered around the campfire. Teachers explained the activities planned for the next 3 days. Nature observation. Environmental research. Treasure hunt. Morning hiking. Wildlife photography. Team challenges. The excitement returned immediately. Later that night, the students walked back toward their cabins beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Nora stopped for a moment. They are beautiful. Ethan looked up beside her. My grandmother used to say every bright star reminds us that even after darkness comes, light still finds a way to shine. Nora smiled softly. I like that. They stood there in comfortable silence. For a brief moment. It felt as if the whole world had stopped. Then Ethan quietly turned away. As he reached the shadows beside his cabin, a sharp pain shot through his chest. He grabbed a nearby wooden fence for support. His breathing became uneven. He pulled a folded handkerchief from his pocket and covered his mouth. When he lowered it, tiny drops of blood stained the white cloth. His smile disappeared. Only for a moment. He carefully folded the handkerchief, slipped it back into his pocket, and looked up at the stars once more. No, he whispered to himself. Not yet. Straightening his shoulders, he forced another smile onto his face before walking back toward the others. From a distance, the brightest star in the sky shimmered above Eagle Mountain, as if silently watching over a secret only heaven knew. The sound of birds echoed across Eagle Mountain before dawn. A cool breeze drifted through the tall trees, gently brushing against the wooden cabins where the students slept. At exactly 5 o'clock, a loud whistle pierced the peaceful morning. Rise and shine. Mr. Raymond's cheerful voice echoed through the camp. Everyone outside in 5 minutes. Groans filled every cabin. I just closed my eyes. It's too early. Can we skip today? Within minutes, sleepy students stumbled outside wearing sportswear and sneakers. Mrs. Adebayo stood at the front with a smile. Today is going to be busy. You'll hike the mountain, study the forest ecosystem, visit local farms, complete your nature journals, and this evening we'll hold our annual knowledge challenge. Daniel sighed dramatically. We came here to rest. Everyone laughed. You came here to learn, Mrs. Adebayo corrected. The hiking trail wound through towering trees whose branches formed a green roof overhead. Sunlight slipped through the leaves in thin golden rays. Small streams crossed the narrow paths, and colorful butterflies floated lazily among the wildflowers. The students stopped often to write observations in their journals. Nora quietly sketched everything she saw. An ancient tree. A family of monkeys swinging between branches. A waterfall pouring over smooth rocks. Ethan glanced at her notebook. You don't just draw what you see. She looked at him. I draw how it feels. He smiled. I wish I could see the world the way you do. She handed him a pencil. Try. He laughed. My stick figures would probably scare the birds away. For the first time in years, Nora laughed so hard that tears gathered in her eyes. Several classmates turned in surprise. No one had ever heard her laugh like that before. Later that morning, the students visited a large organic farm managed by an elderly farmer named Mr. Bello. Rows of vegetables stretched across the valley. Fruit trees stood proudly beneath the bright blue sky. The students eagerly asked questions. How long does it take mango trees to grow? What keeps insects away? Why are some bananas shorter than others? Mr. Bello patiently answered each question before stopping beside a tiny mango seedling. This little tree, he said gently, may look small today. He carefully covered its roots with soil. But one day, someone will rest beneath its shade. The students nodded thoughtfully. Ethan quietly looked toward Nora. She was already sketching the little tree. After lunch, each research group was assigned a different section of the reserve. Ethan and Nora found themselves working together. Their task was to observe wildlife near a quiet stream. As they walked along the riverbank, a faint cry caught Nora's attention. Did you hear that? Ethan stopped. They followed the sound until they discovered a young eagle trapped beneath fallen branches. One wing was injured. The frightened bird struggled desperately. Without hesitation, Ethan carefully knelt beside it. It's okay. His calm voice softened the animal's fear. Together, he and Nora gently lifted the heavy branches. The eagle slowly stood. Although injured, it was free. A wildlife ranger arrived moments later. You two did exactly the right thing, he said. We'll take care of it from here. As the ranger carried the bird away, Nora smiled. She quietly opened her notebook. One item on her list read, heavy checkmark, rescue an injured animal. Ethan noticed. One dream completed. She looked at him in surprise. You read my list? He nodded. I'm sorry. Were you laughing too? He shook his head. No. I thought they were beautiful. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nora smiled. No one has ever said that before. That evening, excitement filled the camp hall. It was time for the annual knowledge challenge. 2 teams stood opposite each other. Mrs. Adebayo held the microphone. First question. What is the largest rainforest in the world? Hands shot into the air. The Amazon rainforest. Correct. Applause erupted. Another question followed. Which animal is known as the king of the jungle? Lion. Correct. The competition became intense. Finally, Mrs. Adebayo smiled. Last question. What is the greatest treasure a person can leave behind? Silence. Students exchanged confused looks. Daniel whispered. Money. Another guessed. Gold. Mrs. Adebayo shook her head. Ethan slowly raised his hand. The kindness people remember after you're gone. The room became completely quiet. Mrs. Adebayo smiled warmly. Excellent answer. Nora looked at Ethan thoughtfully. Something about the way he answered made her wonder if he knew something the others didn't. Night fell gently over Eagle Mountain. The sky glittered with thousands of stars. Most students gathered around another campfire, roasting corn and singing songs. But Ethan quietly led Nora up a small hill overlooking the valley. She looked around in amazement. This place is beautiful. It gets even better. Minutes later, the final glow of sunset disappeared. Darkness settled across the mountains. Then, one by one, the stars appeared. Hundreds. Thousands. An endless ocean of light. Nora stared upward without speaking. I've never seen so many stars. Ethan pointed toward one that shone brighter than the others. If you could give that star a name, what would it be? She thought for a long moment. I don't know. He smiled. Then I'll choose. She looked at him curiously. What? Hope. Why? Because no matter how dark the night becomes. He kept his eyes fixed on the glowing star. Hope always shines. Nora felt tears gathering in her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her with such gentleness. She whispered, I'll never forget tonight. Before returning to camp, Ethan reached into his backpack. I have something for you. He handed Nora a small wooden box. Inside was a delicate silver pendant shaped like a tiny star. She looked at him in surprise. You bought this? He shook his head. I made it. You made this? My grandfather taught me wood carving when I was little. She carefully held the pendant against her heart. It's beautiful. No. Ethan smiled softly. The person wearing it is. Nora blushed and quickly looked away. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Back at camp, music filled the air. Students danced beneath strings of glowing lanterns. Teachers laughed as everyone celebrated another successful day. Daniel pulled Ethan toward the dance circle. Come on. You can't hide forever. Ethan laughed and joined them. For a while, everything felt perfect. Nora watched him from across the campfire. She realized something. She hadn't smiled this much in years. Maybe her greatest wish wasn't simply to make one true friend anymore. Maybe she was beginning to fall in love. At that very moment, Ethan suddenly stopped dancing. His smile faded. His breathing became heavy. He pressed one hand against his chest. The music continued. No one noticed. He tried taking another step. The world spun around him. His vision blurred. Nora. He whispered weakly. Before anyone could reach him, he collapsed onto the ground. The music stopped. Students screamed. Teachers rushed forward. Nora dropped to her knees beside him. Ethan. His eyes slowly closed. The camp that had echoed with laughter only moments before fell into terrified silence as an ambulance siren wailed in the distance. The flashing lights of the ambulance disappeared into the darkness as Nora sat frozen on the roadside. Her hands trembled. Only moments ago, Ethan had been laughing with everyone around the campfire. Now, he was fighting for his life. No one spoke during the drive to the nearest hospital. The cheerful atmosphere that had filled Eagle Mountain only an hour earlier had vanished, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Inside the emergency room, doctors and nurses rushed from one side to another. Blood pressure is dropping. Prepare another 4-line. We need the consultant immediately. The doors closed behind them. Outside, the students waited in complete silence. Daniel paced back and forth. Mrs. Adebayo folded her hands in prayer. Nora stared at the floor, unable to think about anything except Ethan's smile. Hours passed. Finally, an elderly doctor stepped into the waiting area. His face was calm but heavy with concern. Who are Ethan Okoro's teachers? Mrs. Adebayo quickly stood. I am. The doctor sighed softly. Ethan has been battling acute myeloid leukemia, a serious cancer of the blood. The room fell silent. What? Daniel whispered. The doctor continued gently. From the medical records we received, he was diagnosed several months ago. He has been receiving treatment, but the illness has progressed. Mrs. Adebayo covered her mouth. He never told us. The doctor nodded. He asked his family to keep it private. He didn't want anyone to treat him differently. Tears rolled down Nora's face. Suddenly, everything made sense. His constant kindness. His urgency. His habit of making every day special. He had known. All along. He had known his time might be short. The next morning, Ethan slowly opened his eyes. The first face he saw was his father sitting quietly beside the bed. His hair had turned gray long before his age. His eyes were swollen from crying. You scared me, his father whispered. Ethan smiled weakly. I'm sorry, Dad. You should have rested. I wanted to finish the trip. His father lowered his head. You've always worried more about everyone else than yourself. Ethan gently reached for his father's hand. You taught me that love isn't measured by how long we live. It's measured by how we live. His father could no longer hold back his tears. Later that afternoon, Nora quietly entered the hospital room. She stopped at the doorway. Ethan looked weaker than she had ever seen him. Yet, he smiled exactly the same way. I knew you'd come. She walked over slowly. Why didn't you tell me? He looked toward the window. I didn't want pity. I wanted normal days. Nora's voice shook. You trusted strangers enough to help them. But you couldn't trust your friends. I was afraid. Of what? That everyone would spend our remaining time crying instead of smiling. Silence filled the room. Finally, Nora whispered. You carried all this alone. He smiled gently. I wasn't alone anymore. She looked at him. I met you. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. Without saying another word, she held his hand. Over the next few days, students visited Ethan one after another. Each left the hospital changed. Daniel apologized for taking life for granted. Another classmate admitted he had bullied others just to fit in. A quiet girl confessed she had stopped speaking to her father after a misunderstanding. Ethan listened to each of them with patience. He never complained about his own pain. Instead, he encouraged everyone else. Life is too short to waste on anger. Tell people you appreciate them. Don't wait for tomorrow to be kind. One afternoon, Nora noticed Ethan's backpack resting beside the hospital bed. She picked it up carefully. Inside were dozens of neatly wrapped envelopes. Each one had a different name written on it. Daniel. Mrs. Adebayo. Mr. Raymond. The school gardener. The security guard. Even the cafeteria cook. What are these? Nora asked. Ethan smiled. My goodbye letters. Her heart broke. You wrote all of this? I wanted everyone to know they mattered. She opened one addressed to the school gardener. Inside was a simple note. Thank you for planting flowers every year. They made difficult school days feel beautiful. Another letter thanked the cafeteria cook for always serving students with kindness. Another encouraged Daniel to become the engineer he dreamed of becoming. Nora could barely continue reading. Each letter reminded someone that their ordinary acts of kindness had changed lives. That evening, Ethan asked his father to bring a small video camera. I need to record something. His father quietly pressed the record button. Ethan looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this. He smiled softly. Then I'm probably looking at the stars from somewhere higher. He chuckled gently before continuing. Please don't be sad for too long. I was lucky. I had wonderful teachers. A loving father. And friends who taught me that even lonely hearts can smile again. He paused to catch his breath. If someone hurt you, forgive them. If someone helped you, thank them. If you love someone, tell them. Life doesn't promise another sunrise. His breathing became heavier. But love. He smiled once more. Love always leaves light behind. The recording ended. The following morning, Ethan asked Nora to wheel him outside into the hospital garden. Bright yellow flowers swayed gently in the wind. Butterflies floated from one blossom to another. It reminds me of Eagle Mountain, Nora whispered. Ethan nodded. Remember your bucket list? She smiled sadly. I never finished it. He pointed toward a small empty patch of soil. Help me with one more. A nurse handed them a young oak sapling. Together, they planted it carefully. Ethan pressed the soil gently around its roots. One day, he whispered, this tree will give strangers shade. Nora looked at him. Just like you. He smiled. Promise me something. Anything. When you feel alone, look up. The brightest stars only appear when the night is darkest. Nora nodded through tears. I promise. As evening approached, Ethan grew unusually quiet. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and crimson. He looked toward the horizon with peaceful eyes. It really is beautiful. Nora squeezed his hand. It is. He smiled. No. I'm talking about life. Those were the last words he spoke that day. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the distant hills, the heart monitor beside his bed suddenly began to sound. A steady alarm echoed through the room. Doctors rushed inside. Nurses hurried past Nora. She was gently led outside as the doors closed. She stood frozen in the hallway, praying with all her heart. The hospital hallway was silent. Nora stood motionless outside the emergency room, her hands clasped tightly together. Through the small glass window, she could see doctors and nurses moving quickly around Ethan's bed. Mrs. Adebayo and several students arrived minutes later. No one spoke. Everyone prayed in silence. Then, the steady sound of the heart monitor became one long, continuous tone. The doctors stopped. One by one, they lowered their heads. The room grew still. A few moments later, the elderly doctor stepped outside. His eyes were filled with sympathy. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could. Nora's knees gave way. Daniel caught her before she fell. Tears streamed down every face in the hallway. Mrs. Adebayo covered her mouth, unable to hold back her sobs. Ethan Okoro, the boy who never stopped smiling, had taken his final breath. 3 days later, Evergreen International College held a memorial service. The school hall was decorated with white flowers and hundreds of small paper stars hanging from the ceiling. At the center stood a large portrait of Ethan, wearing the same warm smile everyone remembered. Students, teachers, parents, and members of the community filled every seat. The atmosphere was heavy with grief. Mr. Raymond stepped onto the stage. I have taught many students over the years. He paused, struggling to find his voice. But very few taught me. Ethan reminded us that kindness is not weakness. It is strength. The audience applauded through their tears. Mrs. Adebayo then walked forward holding a small wooden box. This was found among Ethan's belongings. He asked us to play this only after today's memorial. She connected a projector. The lights dimmed. Ethan appeared on the screen. He smiled exactly as everyone remembered him. If you're watching this, I guess I finally finished my journey. Soft laughter mixed with tears echoed through the hall. I know many of you are hurting. But please, don't let my story become one of sadness. Let it become a reason to love people more. He looked directly into the camera. Daniel. The young man looked up in surprise. You once told me you wanted to become an engineer but were afraid you'd fail. Don't quit. Build something that makes people's lives better. Daniel wiped away tears. I believe in you. The video continued. Mrs. Adebayo. Thank you for believing in students even when we didn't believe in ourselves. She quietly bowed her head. Mr. Raymond. Thank you for teaching us that discipline and kindness can exist together. The hall remained silent. Every word felt deeply personal. Finally, Ethan smiled again. And Nora. She froze. If you're watching this, it means you kept your promise. Thank you for showing me that even quiet hearts carry beautiful songs. You once wrote that you wanted to leave behind a reason for someone to smile. He laughed softly. You already have. Never stop drawing. Never stop dreaming. And whenever life feels too heavy, look up. I'll be cheering for you from the brightest star. The screen slowly faded to black. Not a single dry eye remained in the hall. After the memorial, Ethan's father stood before the students. My son left one final request. He opened a folder. Instead of buying expensive flowers, he wanted that money used to help others. The room fell silent. He smiled proudly. Ethan saved every gift, scholarship award, and prize money he received over the years. He asked me to use it to create the Bright Star Scholarship, helping students who cannot afford to continue their education. The audience erupted into applause. He also asked that trees be planted every year at this school, so future students can rest beneath their shade. Teachers and students immediately volunteered. By sunset, dozens of young trees stood proudly around the school grounds. Weeks passed. Graduation day finally arrived. The students wore their caps and gowns with pride. Yet one seat remained empty. A single white rose rested there. When Nora's name was called, she walked across the stage carrying not only her certificate, but also the small wooden star pendant Ethan had carved for her. As she returned to her seat, she looked toward the empty chair. In her heart, she whispered, "We made it." Months later, Nora enrolled at the National College of Arts. She poured every memory into her paintings. One artwork stood above all the others. It showed a mountain beneath a sky filled with countless stars. At the center was one brilliant star shining brighter than the rest. She titled it, "The Star He Left Behind." The painting won first place in a national exhibition. When reporters asked about its meaning, Nora smiled. It is about someone who taught me that life isn't measured by how many years we live. It's measured by how much love we leave behind. Her words spread across newspapers, television, and social media. Thousands of people were touched by the story. Many began volunteering in their communities. Others reconciled with family members they hadn't spoken to in years. Some simply started telling the people they loved how much they meant to them. Without realizing it, Ethan's kindness continued changing lives. 1 year later, Evergreen International College returned to Eagle Mountain Eco Reserve. This time, the new graduating class visited the same hill where Ethan and Nora had watched the stars. Mrs. Adebayo gathered everyone together. She pointed toward a large oak tree that had grown strong and healthy. This tree was planted by a student who believed every act of kindness grows into something greater. The students listened carefully. Nearby stood a wooden sign. It read, "Leave every place better than you found it." No name. No photograph. Just a message. Exactly how Ethan would have wanted it. As night fell, Nora remained behind. She looked toward the sky. Thousands of stars sparkled above the mountain. Then, she noticed one star shining brighter than all the others. A gentle breeze brushed across her face. She smiled. "I kept my promise." She touched the wooden pendant around her neck. "And I'll keep making people smile." The wind carried the leaves softly through the trees. For a brief moment, it almost sounded like laughter. Nora closed her eyes. Not because she was saying goodbye, but because she had finally learned that love never truly disappears. It lives on in every kind word, every helping hand, every act of forgiveness, every dream we encourage, and every life we choose to brighten. She opened her eyes once more and looked at the brilliant star above Eagle Mountain. Some treasures are buried beneath the earth. Others are locked inside vaults. But the greatest treasures are the people who teach us how to love before they become part of the sky. Be kind while you have the chance. Forgive while there is still time. Tell the people you love how much they mean to you. Life is precious, tomorrow is never promised, but kindness has a way of living forever.